On the morning of September 1st, 1449, in the Forbidden City's eastern palace quarters, Imperial Guard Captain Zhang Yong made a discovery that would shake the Ming Dynasty to its core. Behind a seemingly ordinary rosewood cabinet in the quarters of Chief Eunuch Wang Zhen, he found something impossible, a ledger written in blood, documenting over 300 names. Next to each name, a date, a sum of silver taels, and a single character that meant silenced. But it wasn't the ledger that made Zhang's hands tremble. It was the delicate jade crickets arranged in perfect rows, 73 of them, each one hollow, each one containing a residue that the imperial physicians would later identify as a lethal combination of arsenic and aconite root. The crickets themselves were still warm, as if they'd just been handled. In the adjacent room, servants were preparing for that evening's cricket fighting tournament, the most popular entertainment among the palace eunuchs and nobles. An entertainment where fortunes changed hands with each match. An entertainment where participants handled their prized insects with bare hands, bringing them close to their faces, breathing in the dust from their wings. The palace would go into lockdown within the hour. But the truth was far more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. Before we uncover the truth about the Forbidden City eunuchs' crickets and the 1449 Beijing palace cricket fighting ring that concealed a poison conspiracy, make sure to subscribe to FearSermon and ring that notification bell. What we're about to reveal comes from recently translated Ming Dynasty archives that have never been shared in English before. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. We love hearing from our community of mystery seekers around the world. The year 1449 marked a pivotal moment in Ming Dynasty history, though not for the reasons you'll find in conventional textbooks. Emperor Yingzong sat on the dragon throne, but real power resided elsewhere, in the hands of the eunuchs who controlled access to the emperor, managed the imperial household, and increasingly influenced state policy. The Forbidden City was still relatively new, completed just 29 years earlier in 1420. Its massive walls enclosed a world unto itself, 9,000 rooms housing emperors, concubines, servants, guards, and the ever-present eunuchs. These castrated men, forbidden from having families of their own, created alternative hierarchies, alternative economies, and alternative entertainments within the palace walls. Cricket fighting had been a Chinese pastime for over 1,000 years by this point, but in the Ming Dynasty palaces, it had evolved into something far more elaborate. The insects weren't just fighters, they were status symbols, investments, and in some cases, worth more than a year's salary for a common official. Nobles and eunuchs would pay astronomical sums for champion crickets, bred for aggression and stamina. The insects were kept in specially carved gourds, fed exotic diets of mosquitoes and cucumber, and trained using elaborate techniques passed down through generations. Chief Eunuch Wang Zhen had risen to unprecedented power through his control of the young emperor's daily life. He managed the emperor's education, his leisure time, and crucially, his access to information from the outside world. Wang Zhen wasn't born to this power. He had clawed his way up through the eunuch hierarchy using intelligence, ruthlessness, and an uncanny ability to eliminate rivals before they even knew they were threats. The cricket fighting rings that Wang Zhen organized weren't officially sanctioned, but everyone knew about them. Every third night, in the eastern palace quarters, lanterns would burn late. Laughter and shouts would echo through the corridors as dozens of palace insiders gathered to watch their insects battle in shallow porcelain arenas. Money flowed freely, silver taels, jade ornaments even. Official positions were wagered on the outcome of these miniature gladiatorial contests. To the outside observer, these gatherings seemed harmless, childish even. Grown men obsessing over insects, shouting encouragement at creatures smaller than their thumbs. But those who paid attention noticed troubling patterns. Certain participants seemed to win with uncanny frequency. Others, particularly those who had crossed Wang Zhen in court politics, would attend these gatherings and then, within weeks, fall suddenly ill. Some recovered, many did not. The Imperial Hospital recorded an unusual spike in summer fever deaths among palace residents in 1448. 23 cases, all men who worked in or near the palace administration. The symptoms were consistent: weakness, vomiting, convulsions, and finally, respiratory failure. The physicians attributed it to bad air from the palace moat, to spoiled food from the imperial kitchens, to anything except the obvious pattern that connected every victim. They had all been regular participants in Wang Zhen's cricket fighting tournaments. One physician, Imperial Dr. Shen Qiu, noted something peculiar in his private journals that wouldn't be discovered until centuries later, during renovations of the old Imperial Hospital archives. He wrote, The afflicted show signs similar to arsenic poisoning, yet no arsenic is found in their food or drink. Most curious, several complained of numbness in their fingers and a bitter taste that began after handling their fighting crickets. I presented these observations to the chief eunuch's office and was told not to pursue this line of inquiry further. Dr. Shen died 3 weeks after writing that entry. The official cause, heart failure. He was 31 years old. The first incident that should have raised alarm occurred on May 3, 1448. Assistant Secretary Li Bai, a mid-level official who had recently submitted a memorial to the emperor criticizing the eunuch's growing power, attended one of Wang Zhen's cricket tournaments. Li was known for his prize cricket, Golden Thunder, which had won 16 consecutive matches. That night, Golden Thunder was matched against a cricket owned by one of Wang Zhen's close associates. According to multiple witnesses, Li handled his cricket carefully before the match, as was customary, checking its legs, its mandibles, its overall condition. The fight was brief. Golden Thunder, usually aggressive and dominant, seemed lethargic. It lost within minutes. Li, visibly upset about his substantial gambling losses, left the gathering early. Within 2 days, Li Bai was bedridden. Palace records describe violent tremors, excessive salivation, and confusion. He kept insisting that his fingers burned, that he could still feel the cricket's shell against his skin. Li's wife later testified that he scrubbed his hands until they bled, convinced something was wrong with them. He died on May 7th. The Imperial Hospital's diagnosis, apoplexy brought on by distress over gambling debts. But Li's death should have been investigated more thoroughly for one simple reason. His cricket died the same day he did, in the same manner with the same symptoms. The second incident involved 3 men simultaneously. On July 19, 1448, 3 minor officials, all allies of a court faction opposing Wang Zhen's influence, attended the cricket tournament together. They had pooled their resources to purchase an expensive fighting cricket from a breeder in Shandong province, paying 40 taels of silver for what they believed would be a champion. The cricket fought twice that evening, winning both matches. The 3 men celebrated, passing the insect between them, examining it proudly. They made plans to enter it in the prestigious autumn tournament, where the emperor himself sometimes attended. 1 week later, all 3 were ill. 2 died within days of each other, August 1st and August 3rd. The third, Junior Secretary Huang Wei, survived, but his testimony would later prove crucial. Huang reported that on the night of the tournament, while he was in the privy, he saw Wang Zhen's personal servant handling their cricket's container. When Huang confronted him, the servant claimed he was merely admiring the insect and quickly returned it. Huang thought nothing of it at the time. But during his illness, as fever ravaged his body, Huang began to suspect. He sent a secret message to his brother outside the palace. The crickets are wrong. Wang Zhen is killing us through the crickets. Investigate the jade containers. Huang survived his illness, but he would never speak publicly about his suspicions. Those who knew him said he became a different man, paranoid, withdrawn, refusing to attend any social gatherings in the palace. The third incident represented a shift in Wang Zhen's methodology. Or perhaps it was simply when the pattern became undeniable. In early August 1449, a group of 6 younger eunuchs who served in the inner court began to challenge Wang Zhen's authority. They were led by a charismatic eunuch named Lu Jin, who had the emperor's ear on certain matters and represented a potential threat to Wang Zhen's monopoly on imperial access. Wang Zhen invited the group to a private cricket tournament in his personal quarters, a significant honor that couldn't be refused without giving offense. He presented each of them with a gift, a jade cricket container, each one exquisitely carved with their personal name and auspicious symbols. The gesture seemed generous, even conciliatory. The young eunuchs used these containers to house their fighting crickets. Within the month, 4 of the 6 were dead. The official records are clinical: sudden illness, summer fever, heart weakness. But palace servants whispered about the screams from the eunuchs' quarters, about the way the afflicted clawed at their own throats, about the identical nature of each death. Lu Jin survived, but only because he had given his jade container to a servant to polish. The servant, a man named Chen who had no enemies and no political significance, died instead. Lu Jin understood immediately what had happened. He went into hiding within the palace complex, moving between different servants' quarters, refusing to touch anything that came from Wang Zhen's household. It was Liu Jin who first approached Imperial Guard Captain Zhang Yong with his suspicions. Zhang was one of the few military officials in the palace who had maintained independence from the eunuch factions. His position required him to investigate threats to the emperor's safety, and Liu Jin convinced him that Wang Zhen represented exactly such a threat. The fourth incident was different. It was personal for Zhang Yong. His own younger brother, Zhang Ming, was a junior military officer who had recently been assigned to palace duty. Zhang Ming was exactly the type of young, promising official that Wang Zhen needed to either co-opt or eliminate. In late August 1449, Zhang Ming received an invitation to join the cricket fighting tournament. Captain Zhang Yong tried to warn his brother, but without concrete evidence, his warnings sounded paranoid. Zhang Ming attended the tournament on August 28th. He borrowed a cricket from one of Wang Zhen's associates, handled it during a match, and returned home that night complaining of a headache. By August 30th, Zhang Ming was dead. Zhang Yong's grief transformed into determination. He began investigating in earnest, speaking quietly with physicians, reviewing death records, tracking the pattern of cricket tournaments and subsequent deaths. He discovered that over the past 16 months, 43 people had died of sudden illness within the palace, and 38 of them had attended Wang Zhen's cricket tournaments in the weeks before their deaths. But the most chilling discovery came from interviewing the families of the dead. Many reported the same detail. Their loved ones had complained about a peculiar smell on their hands after handling crickets, a smell like bitter almonds mixed with copper. Several had scrubbed their hands raw trying to remove this phantom scent, and multiple wives reported that their husbands had experienced vivid nightmares in the nights before falling ill, always featuring the same imagery: crickets with human faces, singing songs of death. If this story is giving you chills, hit that like button. It helps more people discover these lost chapters of history. Share this with someone who loves dark mysteries and true crime from the past. What we're about to reveal next shows just how deep this conspiracy went. Let's discover what happens next. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. On August 31st, 1449, a junior servant named Wen Dai was cleaning Wang Zhen's private quarters when he accidentally knocked over a decorative shelf. Among the items that fell was a small wooden box that split open upon impact. Inside were 7 jade crickets, but these weren't containers for living insects. They were solid jade, carved to look exactly like cricket containers, each one hollow with a tiny opening at the top. Wen Dai, curious about these strange objects, examined them more closely. Inside each hollow jade cricket was a residue, a white powder mixed with a darker substance. The smell was distinctive, bitter and metallic. Wen Dai had grown up in a rural village where arsenic was used to poison rats. He knew that smell. Terrified, Wen Dai hid the jade crickets in his clothing and went directly to someone he trusted, his distant cousin, who served in Captain Zhang Yong's guard unit. By evening, the jade crickets were in Zhang Yong's possession. Zhang Yong understood immediately what he was looking at, but he needed confirmation. He couldn't approach the Imperial Hospital. Too many physicians were either in Wang Zhen's pocket or too intimidated to help. Instead, he sought out a retired physician named Dr. Feng, who lived just outside the Forbidden City and was known for his expertise in toxicology. Dr. Feng's analysis was damning. The residue in the jade crickets was a sophisticated poison mixture, arsenic trioxide combined with processed aconite root, and something else, a sticky tree resin that would cause the poison to adhere to whatever surface it touched. Someone had ground this mixture into an extremely fine powder and applied it to the interior of the jade crickets. Any living cricket stored inside would become coated with the poison. Anyone handling such a cricket would transfer the poison to their skin, and from there it would absorb into their bloodstream, or be inadvertently ingested when they touched their face or food. The genius of the method was its subtlety. The amount of poison on any single cricket wouldn't be immediately lethal. It would build up over hours or days. The symptoms would seem like natural illness, and crucially, the poison source would be removed from the victim's possession when they returned the borrowed cricket, or when their own cricket died. No evidence would remain in the victim's quarters. Dr. Feng also noted something chilling. The mixture had been prepared by someone with sophisticated knowledge of medicine and toxicology. This wasn't crude rat poison. The proportions were exact, designed to maximize suffering while minimizing the chance of immediate detection. Whoever made this, Dr. Feng told Zhang Yong, wanted their victims to suffer before dying. They wanted them to know they were dying but be unable to prove it. Zhang Yong now had evidence, but he faced a crucial problem. Wang Zhen was at the height of his power. He controlled access to the emperor, commanded the loyalty of most palace eunuchs, and had allies among the court officials. A direct accusation without overwhelming proof would likely result in Zhang Yong's own death, made to look like an accident or suicide naturally. Zhang Yong needed to catch Wang Zhen in the act, and he needed witnesses. That couldn't be silenced. The opportunity came sooner than expected. September 1st, 1449 was scheduled to be a grand cricket tournament, a celebration of the upcoming Mid-Autumn Festival. The emperor himself had expressed interest in attending, which meant that dozens of high-ranking officials and nobles would be present. More importantly, it meant that any scandal revealed during the event would be impossible to suppress. Zhang Yong devised a careful plan. He would raid Wang Zhen's quarters during the tournament, when Wang Zhen would be occupied and unable to destroy evidence. He would bring imperial guards loyal to him, along with several honest officials as witnesses, and he would document everything they found. The raid began at the hour of the goat, 2 p.m. in modern terms. Zhang Yong and 12 guards entered Wang Zhen's private quarters in the Eastern Palace. They had a mandate signed by the Minister of War. Zhang Yong had convinced him that there was evidence of a plot to poison the emperor himself, which was technically true, given that some of the victims had been close to the emperor. What they found exceeded even Zhang Yong's darkest suspicions. The primary discovery was the ledger, bound in black silk, written in a peculiar red ink that analysis would later confirm was mixed with human blood. The ledger was organized with bureaucratic precision. Each page documented a target, their name, position, their political affiliations, and crucially their weaknesses, gambling debts, family troubles, any information that could be used against them. Next to each name was a series of dates and notations. First application, jade cricket gifted. Second application, tournament on date. Third application, borrowed cricket, symptoms observed. Targets silenced. The ledger covered 314 names. 46 were marked as silenced. Another 73 were marked as in progress. The rest were marked as future targets. But the ledger wasn't the most disturbing find. In a locked cabinet behind the rosewood furniture, Zhang Yong's men discovered the jade crickets, 73 of them, arranged in perfect rows on velvet-lined trays. Each one was labeled with a name and a date. Some were still warm, recently handled. Others had residue clearly visible inside their hollow bodies. There was also a chest containing compounds for preparing the poison, sealed jars of arsenic, dried aconite root, various resins and binding agents, and detailed instructions written in Wang Zhen's own hand. The instructions included precise measurements, preparation methods, and even notes on dosage. For immediate effect, use double portions. For slow death with maximum suffering, use standard portions over 3 applications. Perhaps most chilling was a separate document, a treatise on poison application methods. It discussed various delivery mechanisms that Wang Zhen had experimented with before settling on the jade crickets. Earlier methods had included poisoned teacups, contaminated gambling tiles, and even poisoned clothing. The document noted that each method had been unsatisfactory due to high chance of discovery or insufficient control over dosage. The jade crickets, Wang Zhen had written, were the perfect method. The targets handle them willingly, enthusiastically even. They bring the poison close to their face, breathe near it, handle it with bare hands. The entertainment provides the alibi. Accidents with crickets are common, and no one suspects the insects themselves. Better still, the victim's own competitiveness ensures they will continue to participate even as others fall ill, believing themselves more clever or more lucky. Zhang Yong also found something that transformed the case from serial murder to political conspiracy. Correspondence with several court officials, including members of the Grand Secretariat, discussing which specific targets to eliminate and in what order. The goal wasn't random murder. It was systematic elimination of anyone who might oppose a planned military campaign. Wang Zhen had been preparing for what would later be known as the Tumu Crisis, a disastrous military campaign against the Oirat Mongols that Wang Zhen would convince the emperor to lead personally. Anyone who might argue against the campaign, anyone who might convince the emperor to reconsider, anyone with the intelligence and political skill to prevent the disaster, Wang Zhen had marked them for death. The discovery was documented by scribes, sealed with official stamps, and witnessed by 4 officials of sufficient rank that their testimony couldn't be dismissed. Zhang Yong had his proof. The immediate aftermath of the discovery created chaos in the Forbidden City. Zhang Yong, knowing that Wang Zhen might attempt to destroy evidence or eliminate witnesses, ordered the Eastern Palace quarters sealed. No one entered or left. The jade crickets, the ledger, the poison-making materials, and all correspondence were transferred to the Imperial Guard's headquarters under heavy guard. Wang Zhen, still at the cricket tournament, learned of the raid within the hour. Witnesses reported that his face went white, then crimson. He stood abruptly, knocking over the porcelain arena where two crickets were fighting, and left without explanation. He went directly to the emperor's chambers, attempting to use his privileged access to reach Emperor Yingzong before anyone else could. But Zhang Yong had anticipated this. He had already sent his most trusted officer, Lieutenant Gao Yuan, to the emperor with the seized documents. Lieutenant Gao reached the emperor's outer chambers at the same moment Wang Zhen arrived. What followed was a confrontation witnessed by dozens of palace attendants, a confrontation that would be recounted in official histories with varying degrees of accuracy. Wang Zhen attempted to have Lieutenant Gao arrested on the spot, ordering the eunuch guards to seize him. But Lieutenant Gao produced the Minister of War's mandate and announced in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "Chief Eunuch Wang Zhen stands accused of poisoning 46 officials and plotting to poison 300 more. I carry evidence to present to His Imperial Majesty." The accusation, made publicly in front of so many witnesses, made it impossible for Wang Zhen to simply silence Lieutenant Gao. The young officer was brought before the emperor, with Wang Zhen insisting on being present to defend himself against false accusations. Emperor Yingzong, only 22 years old and heavily dependent on Wang Zhen since childhood, was initially skeptical, but the evidence was overwhelming. The ledger alone was damning, written in Wang Zhen's distinctive calligraphy, containing information that only someone in Wang Zhen's position could possess. The jade crickets with their poison residue, the detailed instructions for poison preparation, the correspondence with co-conspirators, each piece of evidence built an unassailable case. The emperor's grand secretary, Yu Qian, was summoned. Yu Qian was one of the few high-ranking officials with the integrity and courage to speak truthfully to the emperor, and crucially, his name appeared on Wang Zhen's list of future targets. When Yu Qian reviewed the evidence, he confirmed its authenticity and pointed out a crucial detail. Many of the silenced individuals had been political opponents of Wang Zhen's planned military campaign against the Mongols, a campaign that Yu Qian himself had been arguing against. The political implications were staggering. Wang Zhen hadn't just been committing murder, he had been manipulating the highest levels of Ming Dynasty politics, systematically eliminating anyone who might prevent his personal ambitions. Emperor Yingzong, faced with undeniable evidence, had no choice. Wang Zhen was placed under arrest that very evening. However, the political reality was complex. Wang Zhen still commanded significant loyalty among the palace eunuchs, and there were concerns about stability if the extent of his crimes became widely known. The emperor and his advisors faced a dilemma: how to punish Wang Zhen without revealing just how thoroughly one eunuch had infiltrated and corrupted the palace hierarchy. The investigation proper began on September 3, 1449, under the direction of Minister of Justice Chen Hong. The investigation would ultimately last 42 days and involve testimony from over 200 witnesses. The scope of what they uncovered went far beyond the initial poison conspiracy. Investigators discovered that Wang Zhen's poisoning operation had required an extensive support network. At least 16 people were directly involved: the physician who prepared the poisons, a disgraced doctor named Physician Shu who had been expelled from the Imperial Hospital for malpractice and subsequently recruited by Wang Zhen, 4 servants who handled the physical application of poison to the jade crickets, 6 eunuchs who helped identify targets and monitor their activities, 3 officials who provided political intelligence, and 2 guards who ensured certain victims weren't given medical attention quickly enough to save them. Each conspirator was interrogated separately, under interrogation, which in Ming Dynasty legal proceedings often involved torture for those of lower social rank. The full extent of the conspiracy emerged. Physician Shu revealed that Wang Zhen had been planning the poison scheme for over 3 years, initially testing different compounds on prisoners and convicted criminals to determine the most effective mixtures. The servants described the meticulous process: cleaning the jade crickets, applying the poison mixture with fine brushes, allowing it to dry, then delivering the contaminated crickets to Wang Zhen for use at tournaments. The investigation also uncovered Wang Zhen's selection methodology. Targets were chosen based on a sophisticated understanding of palace politics. Wang Zhen didn't simply kill all his enemies at once. That would have been too obvious. Instead, he eliminated them in carefully timed waves, spacing the deaths out to appear like natural attrition. He varied the symptoms by adjusting poison dosages, making some deaths quick and others slow. He even occasionally allowed certain targets to survive, either because they'd become useful to him or because their survival would deflect suspicion from the real pattern. One of the most disturbing testimonies came from a servant named Luo Bei, who had served Wang Zhen for 7 years. Luo described how Wang Zhen would sometimes attend the funerals of his victims, expressing condolences to their families while privately noting in his ledger whether the death had accomplished its political objective. Luo also revealed that Wang Zhen kept mementos from each victim, small personal items he'd obtained through his servants. These items were found in a locked drawer: jade seals, calligraphy brushes, personal letters, each one labeled with the victim's name and date of death. Wang Zhen had been collecting trophies. The legal proceedings against Wang Zhen posed unique challenges. As a chief eunuch with significant power, he technically held a position equivalent to a third-rank official, which meant he was entitled to certain legal protections and couldn't be tortured during interrogation. Moreover, Wang Zhen's age, he was 63, and his status as a palace eunuch complicated matters. Traditional Confucian legal codes didn't have clear precedents for a eunuch of such high rank committing systematic political murder. The legal debates within the Ministry of Justice focused on several questions. Should Wang Zhen be tried as a mass murderer or as a traitor attempting to undermine the state? Were his co-conspirators equally guilty, or had they been coerced? What punishment was appropriate for a crime of this magnitude? And crucially, how much of this should be made public? The political faction that had supported Wang Zhen, and there were many officials who had benefited from his patronage, argued for minimizing public disclosure. They claimed that revealing the full extent of the conspiracy would damage confidence in the palace administration and potentially inspire copycat crimes. They suggested Wang Zhen be quietly executed and the matter closed with minimal publicity. The opposing faction, led by Grand Secretary Yu Qian, argued that transparency was necessary to prevent future abuses. They insisted that the full details be recorded in official histories and that all co-conspirators face public trial. This wasn't just about punishing Wang Zhen, it was about ensuring that no eunuch could ever again accumulate such unchecked power. The trial itself was held in the Ministry of Justice's main hall, with over 40 officials present as witnesses and judges. Wang Zhen, remarkably, showed no remorse. His defense was chilling in its logic. He claimed he had acted in the emperor's best interests by removing disruptive elements who would have prevented wise policy decisions. He argued that the deaths he caused prevented far greater harm by allowing the emperor's will, which Wang Zhen claimed to represent, to be enacted without interference. When confronted with the evidence of his victims' suffering, the testimonies from family members, the descriptions of their agonizing deaths, Wang Zhen reportedly said, "They died for the dynasty's future. Their pain was brief, the dynasty is eternal. I regret only that I was discovered before my work was complete." The court was stunned by this absence of guilt. It became clear they weren't dealing with a man who had lost his moral compass. They were dealing with someone who had deliberately created an entirely different moral framework in which mass murder was justifiable. The final verdict came on October 14, 1449. Wang Zhen was found guilty of high treason, systematic murder, conspiracy to corrupt the imperial administration, and abuse of imperial authority. He was sentenced to death by lingqi, death by 1,000 cuts, the most severe form of execution reserved for the worst criminals. However, Emperor Yingzong, still influenced by some lingering affection for his former guardian, commuted the sentence to decapitation. Wang Zhen was executed on October 20, 1449, in the public execution ground outside the Meridian Gate. Reports indicate that thousands attended the execution, an unusual occurrence for the execution of a palace official. As Wang Zhen was led to the execution block, someone from the crowd threw a dead cricket at him. Others followed suit. By the time he reached the executioner, he was covered in the tiny insect corpses, a grim poetic justice. His 16 co-conspirators received varying sentences. Physician Xu and the 4 servants who directly handled the poisons were executed. The 6 eunuchs who assisted were castrated a second time, a symbolic punishment, and then executed. The 3 officials who provided intelligence were stripped of their ranks and exiled to remote military outposts. The 2 guards were beaten with bamboo rods, 40 strikes, and permanently expelled from military service. But the aftermath of the conspiracy extended far beyond these legal proceedings. The discovery of Wang Zhen's poison ring triggered a massive investigation into the palace eunuch system itself. Emperor Yingzong ordered a comprehensive review of all eunuch appointments, all palace financial records, and all deaths that had occurred within the Forbidden City over the previous 5 years. This investigation revealed disturbing patterns. Wang Zhen's poison conspiracy wasn't unique, it was simply the most sophisticated. At least 3 other eunuchs had been conducting similar, though smaller-scale operations. The investigation identified 12 additional suspicious deaths that likely resulted from poison, though the evidence was insufficient to prosecute anyone posthumously. The investigation also exposed the structural problems that had enabled Wang Zhen's conspiracy. The eunuch system had evolved with minimal oversight, creating parallel power structures within the palace. Eunuchs controlled access to information, managed financial resources, and could effectively isolate the emperor from contradictory viewpoints. The system had created perfect conditions for someone like Wang Zhen to flourish. One particularly disturbing discovery came from the Imperial Hospital's records. The spike in summer fever deaths that Imperial Dr. Shen Chu had noted before his own death was even more pronounced than initially thought. The investigators found that 53 people had died of similar symptoms between 1447 and 1449, far more than Wang Zhen's ledger had indicated. This suggested either that Wang Zhen had additional, undiscovered ledgers, or that other poisoners had been operating simultaneously, using similar methods. The palace cricket tournaments were immediately and permanently banned. Emperor Yingzong issued an edict declaring that cricket fighting within palace walls would be punishable by immediate dismissal and caning. The ban extended to gambling of any kind within the Forbidden City. The cultural aftermath was significant. Cricket fighting, which had been enormously popular among the elite, fell out of favor for decades. The insects became associated with poison and death rather than entertainment. The political aftermath was equally significant. The scandal severely damaged the credibility of the eunuch system. Reform-minded officials used the Wang Zhen case to argue for strict limitations on eunuch authority. A series of new regulations were implemented. Eunuchs were forbidden from holding positions above the 5th rank. They were prohibited from communicating directly with the emperor, without a minister present, and all eunuch appointments required approval from the Ministry of Personnel. However, these reforms would prove temporary. Within 20 years, the eunuch system would again begin accumulating power, and by the late Ming Dynasty, eunuchs would once again wield enormous influence. The lesson of Wang Zhen's poison conspiracy was apparently not learned permanently, or perhaps the structural incentives of the imperial system were too strong to overcome with mere regulation. Tragically, the exposure of Wang Zhen's conspiracy came too late to prevent the Tumu crisis. Just 1 month before the discovery of the poison conspiracy, Wang Zhen had convinced Emperor Yingzong to personally lead a military campaign against the Oirat Mongols. The campaign was a catastrophic failure. The emperor was captured, and tens of thousands of Ming soldiers were killed. Many historians have speculated that if Wang Zhen's conspiracy had been discovered even a few months earlier, the voices arguing against the campaign might have been strong enough to prevent it. Instead, those voices had been systematically silenced through poison. The Wang Zhen poison conspiracy of 1449 represents more than just a historical true crime case. It reveals fundamental truths about power, corruption, and the systems that enable both. The most immediate impact was legal and administrative. The Ming Dynasty implemented new regulations specifically designed to prevent similar conspiracies. The palace safeguard laws enacted in 1450 established several crucial protections: mandatory dual physician approval for any diagnosis within palace walls, required documentation of all deaths including servants and low-rank officials, random inspections of all personal quarters of high-ranking eunuchs and officials, and the creation of an independent oversight body that reported directly to the Ministry of Justice rather than through palace administrators. These regulations represented a recognition that the existing system had failed catastrophically. The fact that Wang Zhen could poison 46 people over 16 months without detection revealed deep structural flaws. The new laws attempted to build in redundancy and transparency, requiring multiple officials to witness and document anything suspicious, creating paper trails that couldn't easily be destroyed, and establishing channels for reporting concerns that bypassed the very people who might be perpetrating the crimes. The case also changed medical and toxicological practices in China. Dr. Feng's analysis of the jade cricket poison mixture led to new research into poison detection. The Imperial Hospital established what was essentially China's first forensic toxicology department, dedicated to identifying poisons in deceased bodies and in suspected contaminated objects. Methods for testing for arsenic and aconite were refined and standardized. Physicians were trained to recognize the specific symptom patterns associated with different poisons. This toxicological knowledge spread beyond the palace. Medical texts published in the decades following 1449 included detailed discussions of poison identification, information that was previously considered too dangerous to widely distribute. The paradoxical result was that making poison knowledge more available actually made poisoning harder to successfully conceal. The cultural impact of the conspiracy extended into Chinese literature and art. The image of the jade cricket, once a symbol of refined entertainment and noble gambling, became associated with treachery and hidden death. Poets and playwrights used cricket imagery to represent false appearances and hidden malice. One particularly famous poem from the 1460s, the Cricket Song, uses the insect as a metaphor for courtiers who smile while plotting murder. Cricket fighting itself never fully recovered its former popularity among the elite. While the practice continued among common people, the association with Wang Zhen's conspiracy tainted it for the upper classes for several generations. Jade cricket containers, once prized collectibles worth substantial sums, became objects of suspicion. Many families destroyed their collections rather than risk the association with poison and murder. The conspiracy also influenced thinking about methodological murder, the use of seemingly innocent objects or practices to deliver poison. Wang Zhen's jade cricket method was studied by criminal investigators as an example of what we might now call delivery system innovation. The case demonstrated that the most effective poisons aren't necessarily the most toxic substances, but rather the ones delivered through the least suspicious means. This led to increased scrutiny of other potentially weaponizable everyday objects. Palace regulations came to restrict personal items that could be similarly abused: shared tea sets, communal writing implements, borrowed clothing, and various other objects that might be contaminated and passed to targets. The regulations created an atmosphere of paranoia, but they also made casual poisoning significantly harder. The Wang Zhen case appeared in legal education for centuries afterward. Law students studied it as an example of conspiracy prosecution, evidence collection, and the challenges of trying high-status criminals. The case raised enduring questions about how to balance the need for justice against political stability, questions that remain relevant in any system where powerful people commit crimes. International observers also took note. Foreign diplomats and traders who heard about the conspiracy carried the story back to their own countries. European accounts from the late 15th and early 16th centuries occasionally reference the Chinese eunuch who killed with insects, usually as an example of the supposedly exotic and treacherous nature of Eastern courts, though the political dynamics Wang Zhen manipulated weren't actually that different from European court intrigues. Perhaps most significantly, the case revealed the dangers of concentrated, unchecked power, a lesson that transcends any particular political system. Wang Zhen's conspiracy was possible because he controlled access to the emperor, because he could operate without oversight, and because the system created strong incentives for subordinates to obey rather than question him. The structural problems that enabled his crimes weren't unique to Ming Dynasty China. They exist whenever power becomes concentrated without adequate accountability. The case also demonstrated the psychological profile of what we might now recognize as a psychopathic serial killer operating within a political context. Wang Zhen showed classic signs: lack of empathy, sophisticated manipulation, ability to compartmentalize his crimes, collection of trophies from victims, and a grandiose sense that normal moral rules didn't apply to him. The fact that he operated for so long suggests both high intelligence and a deep understanding of human psychology. He knew how to select victims, how to deflect suspicion, and how to maintain the loyalty of his accomplices through a combination of rewards and fear. Modern criminologists who have studied the case note that Wang Zhen's methodology shares characteristics with other serial killers who operated within institutional settings. The use of a signature method, the jade crickets, provided him with psychological satisfaction while also serving practical purposes. The spacing of his murders and variation in symptoms suggests a sophisticated understanding of investigation patterns. His keeping of trophies and detailed records indicates a need to memorialize and perhaps relive his crimes. The case has also been studied by experts in organizational psychology and corporate ethics as an example of how institutional culture can enable criminal behavior. The Forbidden City's culture emphasized hierarchy, obedience, and discretion, all admirable qualities in moderation, but qualities that also made it difficult for subordinates to report suspicions about superiors. The fear of being wrong, of causing offense, of disrupting harmony. These cultural values, twisted in Wang Zhen's favor, created perfect conditions for his conspiracy. Similar patterns appear in modern organizational scandals. Whether in corporations, religious institutions, or government agencies, cases of systematic abuse often feature the same elements: a charismatic or powerful leader, a culture that discourages questioning authority, systems that protect the powerful, and subordinates who comply rather than resist, either from fear or from genuine belief in the leader's justifications. The Wang Zhen case suggests that preventing such conspiracies requires more than just good laws. It requires cultural change that makes questioning authority legitimate, that creates safe channels for reporting suspicions, and that builds in checks on power at every level. There's also a darker implication that historians have grappled with: how many similar conspiracies were never discovered. Wang Zhen was caught largely due to a servant's accident and one determined guard captain. If Wen Da hadn't knocked over that shelf, if Zhang Yong hadn't pursued his investigation despite the personal and professional risks, Wang Zhen's conspiracy might have continued for years. The 46 confirmed victims might have become 406. This possibility has led researchers to examine other historical periods for similar patterns. Suspicious clusters of deaths among political figures, unexplained illnesses affecting opponents of powerful individuals, deaths attributed to natural causes but following suspicious patterns. These appear throughout history. How many were genuine coincidences, and how many were undiscovered conspiracies? The Wang Zhen case suggests that sophisticated poisoning could go undetected, even in relatively sophisticated societies with trained physicians and extensive record-keeping. The legacy of Wang Zhen's conspiracy can be seen in later Chinese history. The Ming Dynasty, and later the Qing Dynasty, maintained extensive poison detection protocols in palace kitchens and in the emperor's personal quarters. Silver chopsticks, believed to change color in the presence of certain poisons, became standard at imperial meals. Food tasters became a permanent fixture of palace life. The paranoia generated by Wang Zhen's conspiracy, and by subsequent smaller-scale poisoning incidents, shaped palace culture for centuries. In contemporary China, the Wang Zhen case is sometimes referenced in discussions about corruption and abuse of power. The basic dynamic, a powerful individual systematically eliminating opponents while hiding behind institutional authority, resonates with modern concerns about official corruption. The case serves as a historical reminder that even seemingly absolute power can be exposed and held accountable, though often only after significant damage has been done. The case also raises philosophical questions about evil and moral agency. Was Wang Zhen a monster, or was he a rational actor operating within a system that incentivized his behavior? His lack of remorse suggests genuine belief in the rightness of his actions. He apparently saw himself as a pragmatist, removing obstacles to effective governance. This self-justification is common among those who commit atrocities. They rarely see themselves as villains, but rather